Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the CPA Advisory Show. My name is Chris Herbershine. I am here solo today. Jeremy is out of town. He is hobnobbing it at the practice ignition, which I guess we're calling ignition now, advisory council. So I am all on my own today, which is never a good thing, as most people who know me can advise. But I am here with a very special guest, Chad Davis, who probably needs no introduction of Live CA fame and also of Automation Town fame, which is a great podcast. Chad, how are you today?
Sleepy. It's early morning on the West Coast, and this was last minute. So thank you very much for having me. And I'm glad we can have fun and just riff off some stuff today.
Yeah, this is going to be super fun. Really looking forward to this. And what we're going to do today, we're going to have a very special episode. We're going to talk about automation ideas for advisory services. We're going to go down our list. We're going to see how many we can get through, and we're going to see where this goes. So super fun. So Chad, first idea, what do you got?
Okay, so just to recap, we're going to come up with ideas, some on the fly, a couple we put together and list ahead of time in the sort of couple hours we had to prepare for this. And we'll think about automation, which is essentially either web automation or RPA or using spreadsheets more smartly in terms of advisory. So relating automation to advisory. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And we can spend as little as a few seconds on an idea if it's really dumb, or we can spend a little bit more if it's pretty interesting. And we just kind of riff off each other. So that's what we're doing today. Okay.
Absolutely.
Fun.
But I mean, none of these are dumb. Right.
We'll let everybody else be the judge of these.
Everybody else can figure that out.
Okay, let's get right into it. All right, so number one, I guess we can just go back and forth on these, right? Okay, so the first one is an idea to automate reminder emails for requests of non-financial inputs. So say you're an advisor and you need stuff for your KPIs. People don't have it in a standard way, so they have to get it their own self, and you're constantly nagging them to put these things in. It could be into a Google Sheet, it could be into a Excel file, it could be into a web form, it could be whatever. But actually sending out those automated reminders with the asks out to them. How would you go about sending out those automated reminders?
The way that I would do that generally would be, well, most of our automation, the way that we build it is going to be through Make. And the way that I would do that would be through like the Gmail module inside of Make, and, you know, whatever the flag is going to be, whatever platform that's going to come from, whether it's going to be some sort of a QuickBooks online module where we're doing a calculation or pulling a data point, or maybe it's Airtable, or maybe it's a sheet, and maybe that sheet is connected to QuickBooks Online in some way, shape, or form, like through a Geocon, something like that. But the way that I would do that ultimately would be through probably Make, probably the Gmail module, probably. How would you do it?
Similar, but just to play I'll try to pick something opposite of what you said. There might be some Zapier users, so they could also do the exact same thing using a source. So I think the trick here is that you want a list of clients and you want a list of the things that they have to fill in, and then use those in the automation. So you can have your own master spreadsheet, and you can have dates in that spreadsheet. And then this automation can run once a month or as needed, depending on the dates. And you can run it through Zapier too. So, right, watch sheets, look for dates, receive webhooks, all this kind of fun stuff. But yeah, you could absolutely use Zapier to send the same emails out. And you could also use Zapier's email functions without having to use Gmail or something else. To send those out if you didn't want to use your own emails. Just make sure you get the right reply to addresses when you're working through there. Okay, so that's number one.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Real quick. Chad, Zapier, Make, or something else? Pick one.
For today?
As a favorite. As a favorite.
I'll pick whatever you don't pick. We'll play opposites. I've gone down the Make rabbit hole a little bit too much, but there's some pretty cool other ones that are being thrown out. And I started using Tray recently, Tray.io, and I tried N88 or N8N for some really high volume processing stuff that was killing my make operations and my zaps. So yeah, there's some fun new stuff that's getting a lot better. And the whole world is changing in this, which automation thing should you use? But again, today's just about ideas, Chris. Yep. Come on.
Yep, I'm with you. I had to ask. You're here. I got to ask, right?
Number 2.
Okay. Here's another one. Alerts for unusual activity in GL accounts. And the way that we think about this, the way that we do it internally is standard deviations. So standard deviations across months and across time periods and things like that. And admittedly, this is not a no-code automation, but it is a low-code automation that we built internally. And we use Make for it. There's a little bit of custom Python code in there, not much. It's really only probably 5-10 lines, something like that. I didn't write it. Hired somebody on Upwork. It was super cheap. It was great. Saved me a bunch of time. But the purpose of that is to just flag where there has been unusual activity. We flag that internally so that we can investigate it. And then we can go to the client and say, hey, did you notice? Or is this appropriate? Or were you expecting? And it's basically just a point to trigger a conversation with a client, which is always a good thing in our view.
For number 2, you picked Python code and low code
Yes,
options. I did. Do you have a wish for people to just cut off right here and only listen to the first 2 seconds of the podcast?
It's my favorite one, and I started at the bottom of the list because you started at the top.
Okay, fine. Yeah, or you could use Scrutinize, or you could use other tools in the market that are doing stuff like this too. You don't always have to throw the Chris version of the kitchen sink of code to a problem. So you're right. Do you know of any other tools off the top of your head besides building it yourself and using something like Scrutinize? Any other favorites you've used?
I think Auto Review is one. That's another one that does a similar function. Those are the 2 that I really know.
All right, cool. Let's get through these. Number 3, I've got a list of a few here. Let's pick an easy one. Duplicate vendor reports. So how many times have you gone into somebody's Xero or QuickBooks file? Oh, why don't we never say any other types of files like NetSuite or Intact or Sage? It's always like Xero or QuickBooks. Okay, say you go into an accounting file and it's always messy with duplicate vendors. Always. And maybe it's just something that accountants are bothered with and other people don't care. But we care when we want to look at transaction histories, and there's always things you either have to merge or change and do that kind of stuff. What if you could create a report that runs, and maybe it just sends to you or your accounting team or something else that sends this duplicate vendor report? I have an idea of how I would do it. How would you do it?
The way that I would do that, and the way that we've done that again, is through Make. And we're QBO only, so we pull QBO list, and then we search for similar type of vendors. Maybe there's like a comma missing between like an LLC, kind of like at the end type deal, or maybe it's just like Google versus like Google Workspace or like something like that. And we just like flag these things and review them, send them over to a client.
Okay, so just to be very clear for the techies that have lasted longer than 3 minutes into this, say you've got your list that you're grabbing it from QuickBooks. You're essentially saying for each item in the list, search the list again for what starts with the first 12 letters. Is it contains the middle 12 letters? Like, what are you actually searching for there?
Well, you're going to get like super upset. So one way to do this, I think like Scrutinize and Auto Review do this, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. So the way that we do this internally is we have a low code option built inside of Make.
Okay.
That's actually the way that we do that. I was trying to avoid that.
But... You're like, don't call me out on my on my stuff here, Chad.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. How would I do it? Actually, it depends how you keep your contact lists too, but you're right. I think you could do this where for each item in the list, you could search different parameters. I mean, this is not a good use of your make operations or your zaps by any means, but you could say, show me the list. Then maybe you filter that list in the search by, I don't know, vendors used in the last 2 years or the last year or something like that. And then from there, you have one line that searches for like the first 8 letters are the same as what you searched for, but it's not equal to what you searched for. Then the next one was maybe the exact same thing. So like, what if it's in there twice with the exact same name, like verbatim? Then you could do like maybe a middle search using regex. Wow, we lost everybody.
We lost everybody in regex. Holy cow.
We could say like, okay, take the second word and search the rest of them and see if it matches. But like you could do multiple searches and then for each one, like add it to a list. And then that list would be what you report on. We need to move on. That was a horrible one. You picked number 4.
How about bounced invoices? You send an invoice out, the email address isn't any good. How would you deal with that?
Don't accounting systems already do that?
We've had an issue in QBO. We have a client. Yeah. Well, we don't have to get into that, but yeah, we've had issues.
Okay. So how would I do it?
Yeah.
There's two things.
Draw more attention to it.
two things. I'd find out if like where the alerts go to let you know that it bounced, and then run a filter on that, and then auto send that into an operation that like tells us in Slack or something like that, or finds out who the manager is on that client and then like lets them know the invoice bounced. That's one way. The other way is to not send out invoices from the accounting system. I know, which is kind of weird, but maybe you wanted it to be completely customized and didn't want any of the branding or things being sent from QuickBooks or Xero. And then you could do that. So we built some tools and some systems where we bypassed all of the invoice sending out of the accounting system, and we do it through our own operations, and the reply to addresses and the send addresses like handle the bouncing because those are emails that we monitor ourselves.
Right. So is that a deal where you're using some sort of a PDF maker and then taking the payment link from somewhere else, whether it's like a Stripe or a QBO link or something like that, and adding it to the PDF?
Yeah. So we're big Xero. I'm glad we're kind of back and forth because we're like an all Xero firm. You're an all QuickBooks firm. So with Xero, we can grab the URL of the invoice and the PDF of the invoice right from the API and then go from there. How about QuickBooks?
Very cool. Yeah. Haven't tried it in QuickBooks, but I know that there's a payment link that you can snag through QuickBooks Payments, and I would imagine it would be somewhat similar.
Cool. Did that answer your number?
I think it did.
Okay, good. So that was number 4. Number 5. Let's pick approvals. Okay. So ever need to get something approved from a client before?
All the time.
Good. What are a couple of the top big ones?
Approval max would be one.
Oh no, I mean like what are the situations where someone would need to get something approved?
Can we send this invoice? Can we send this email? Is this expense report approved? Is this expense period approved?
Can we release payment?
Bill pay? Yeah, payments, all that sort of stuff.
Do you approve this monthly package for audit trail purposes? Yeah. That kind of stuff.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So there's a few different ways you could do this. There is a built-in Zapier option now called Approval by Zapier. That is one thing you could put inside of your thing. It would send a message to like Slack or Teams or an email with whatever you want it to look like, and they could press approve, and then you could take that and then continue on with any automations or logs or things like that.
That's cool.
There is also like your own built-in approvals. So if you're familiar with databases or just spreadsheets in general, you could, flip tabs or tags or just select fields into approved or not approved within the automation. So if somebody clicks a link, then maybe it sends that instruction through to Airtable or to an operation in Make or Zapier where it flips that tag over to approved, and then you can run a whole bunch of stuff off of that. So we have that running around for a few things, and it is nice to have. Just be very careful that like the approval links that you send out are not easily like spoofed. It's like it could just be like payment number 4, payment number 5. You want that to be pretty hard for someone to guess. Otherwise, you're going to be sending some stuff that is pretty low on the security ranking.
Yeah,
good.
They can get pretty gnarly pretty quick.
All right, that was number 5. What are we doing for number 6?
Let's see. How about spreadsheet updates for actuals? How would you do that?
Oh, so we're talking like the Geocons of the world. The
Geocons of the world.
I don't know. I've liked this one called Coupler.io. It is a really cool one that is super easy to use. So Geocon's great. Like it's the one that's been around the longest, and it has the ability to do a lot of stuff, but it's pretty complicated. Like the first couple times you're setting it up, get some support from them, and it's pretty good. But I think with all that flexibility comes a little bit of confusion, kind of like the Zapier versus Make situation. So Coupler has been pretty cool because it is like a user interface inside of G Sheets, and it's like an extension. So you go to the tools extensions thing, you open up Coupler, and then it pops up on your screen, and you can have it, pull in a report like a trial balance or just the activity for an account or something like that. And it connects to QuickBooks and Xero and like 12 or 20 other different apps that you might want data from. That's how I would do it. I don't know if I stole your thunder on Geocon, but how would you do it? Same thing?
Nah, Geocon, for the most part, other options would be a Zapier or a Make if you're just pulling data points. It's much more complicated to pull reports, but if you're pulling data points or specific invoices or specific document types, something like that, Geocon or Make, or not Geocon, Make, or Zapier as well.
Awesome. I'll just throw it out here just because I'm familiar with on the Xero side. They have like a reports endpoint as well. So you could say like display the trial balance, and like the entire trial balance will come in without having to go line by line like you might have to create it in other situations. And that's been pretty nice too.
That's awesome. Love that. All right, what are we doing for the next one?
An easy one. Let's say somebody creates a GL account without you knowing, and you get surprised when you're doing your advisory work at the end of the month. How would you set up an alert to let you know that a new GL account has been created?
This is my favorite one. So basically, we just go pull the entire chart of accounts. We look at the created date, and if it's in the last 24 hours, we send an alert. The way that we do that is through our workflow tool, but you can do it through Teams or Slack or whatever. And then that's a great one because it triggers a conversation too. Like, is this account appropriate? Should it really exist? Can we get to this some other way? And do we really need this? What kind of activity are we going to expect? That sort of thing. How would you do it?
I might be less in your face about it. Imagine they created an account and they're like, I just wanted this account for like 2 seconds.
So we do it internally. We flag it internally. We're not going to like send that straight to the client and be like, what are you doing? No. It's internal. And then, so we have that buffer, right? We can couch that conversation.
All right, cool. All I would say is I'd probably add a filter that said, if an account is created and there's activity in it, then do something within the last week or something like that, so it's not so instant. But I also might put a report that says, run this on the first of every month, so that as you're going through and like either doing the bookkeeping or reviewing the bookkeeping and you're starting your thing, maybe there's just a nice digest of stuff instead of like every new GL account. But that's very, very good way of doing that one. All right.
Okay.
What number are we on now? 2, 4, 6, 7. So that was 7. We're on number 8.
Can we do a hard one?
Yeah. This is early and there's no prep here. Like, come on.
That's what makes it fun, Chad. Come on.
Okay, let's do it.
Automated workforce planning. In other words, how are you pulling payroll data, headcount data, that sort of stuff in an automated way? The way that we are doing that after many attempts through many different vehicles is through Giraffe now.
Oh, so you like for all the payroll systems that you have connected, you're throwing it all into Giraffe.
So yeah, we and like candidly, we only have two payroll systems that we're supporting. One would be Rippling, which is on the roadmap, and we haven't tackled that yet. But everybody else we've got is on Gusto, which Giraffe supports.
So I'll represent the Canadians here and say two. Like we're just like bravo for you, super good. We are not that good. We probably work with 6 to 10 payroll apps on average, just because there's so much choice and there's not a lot of reasons for someone who's ingrained in a good payroll system to get off of it typically. So for us, no matter if a company is or a payroll company is good or bad, we have to keep headcount and all that kind of stuff together. So this is a project for us that hasn't been high enough on the priority list to actually do. However, we started looking into a few. So in Canada, there's one called Payworks, a bit of a dinosaur when it comes to tech. They don't have an API, but they have FTP. So we're able to grab some stuff from that and then extrapolate data. But then there's other like really good new ones like Rise and Humi, which don't necessarily have like a public like API to be able to do this kind of stuff. But they're really thinking about it. So we have to grab data from reports, put it in, et cetera, et cetera. That's the more common option, is export at the end of the month and then push it into something, or ask the payroll system for all your client data, and then you can extrapolate out from that. I built this for a friend. Her name's Donna, and she had an issue with Gusto where she wanted that full report export of all your clients and all the payments and all of that stuff kind of broken out. So in a couple hours, we were able to create a form where she submits that report into the form. Oh, the use case was she wanted to know all the manual checks so that she could go and mark all the manual checks off in the right Xero account for all of the like
that's cool
physical checks in Gusto.
Yeah.
So what we ended up doing was, filtering out by check after like extracting the CSV and finding the company name and doing all that kind of stuff. And then from there, throwing it into Airtable, like just the check data. And then from there was tables that were linked to be able to find out like the QuickBooks account, the Xero accounts and all that stuff. And it was able to go in and then mark off the checks as paid against the payroll invoice without them having to do it manually. So that was really cool. That one came up through a request in Mr. Jason Stats' Realize community. So we ended up doing that. I
was going to say, I remember reading about that in Realize.
Yeah. So we were doing a no-code showcase, which happens once a month, and people go in and kind of ask questions or showcase what they're building, and everybody learns from each other. And that was one of them. So it was like super good, like really, really helpful, incredibly like guerrilla in terms of like how to approach it. And there's probably way smarter ways, but like that's how we were able to get through that. It was also a way for me to move the conversation away from the fact that we don't have a really good solution for aggregating payroll data and putting that off of me.
Yep. I hear that.
You called me
all
out.
Right. Number 9, you pick it.
So repricing as an advisor is an interesting topic because it's not necessarily like super accounting related, but you might want to approach this with customers in a way, not just like for yourself, but also for them. So if you know how to do this, then maybe this is something that is super valuable.
So what do you mean exactly by repricing?
Yeah, so I was kind of saying like the topic of repricing. So like as an accountant, maybe you want to go and reprice some of your customers, but you want to filter that out. But also as an advisor, you might be with your customer and thinking about ways that they could reprice their own customers too. So maybe if they have access to certain data points, right, like number of users, like active hours in the app, or just, I don't know, number of projects, just something like that for them. But for accountants, it's like, we have access to their accounting files, we probably could run a report that looks at their average bank balance, their net income, their revenue growth over the course of a certain period, and then automatically creates a lead in your sales system and prompts the sales manager or someone on the sales team or the owner, if by yourself, to look into this. I can't think of like a sexier sales option than to say, okay, I've created a lead for you automatically because this person has had an average bank balance of $2 million for the last 4 months, which is irregular. That's pretty cool without you having to look into it. Now, you're probably a bad advisor if you don't know that already, if you're looking at their stuff monthly. But yeah, creating that lead is the automation based on certain data in your files. That is.
So you're basically punting that conversation over to your salesperson or sales manager or biz dev person or whatever to go back to your existing customer and say, hey, look, we have an opportunity here to maybe increase prices or increase services or do this in a different way. And you're creating that revenue opportunity for them, basically.
Yep, that's something. So again, the idea of monitoring and then alerting. The alert could be a lead, it could be a Slack message, an email, whatever. But that's it.
I love that.
Okay, cool. Do you know what number we're on?
This will be 10. How about an alert for expenses or time that is tracked above a budget? That could be a project budget, or that could be just a total budget. How would you do that?
Alert for expenses above budget is pretty easy because you can flag a time period inside of whatever automation you're creating. You can reference the budget and you can reference the actuals. So you could do it on a line by line basis, which is probably like, that's one way. The other way is you could use, like, to build on whatever number Coupler was, you could put something like Coupler or Geocon together, which may use less operations. It could create its own alerts. And then you could use something in the spreadsheets to flag the automation or the alert.
Yep.
So I'd probably do it that way. And in terms of like the alert, if you could hire somebody, or if you're super techie, go learn it yourself, like learn how to create webhooks out of Google Apps Script. That would be kind of nice too, because then you don't have to like run operations in Zapier or Make to constantly monitor what's happening in spreadsheets. I find that to be a little finicky sometimes. So if you can just go from the spreadsheet, create a formula that says, alert or something, and then upon any new cell changing to the word alert, take that row data and send all that information off into an automation in Zapier or Make. That might be pretty cool. And full disclosure, I had no idea. I still have no idea how to write half of this stuff. So we hired somebody on Upwork, and it cost us like $60, I think. And now we have this like really nice app script webhook thing. And anytime we need to use it, we just copy and paste it into a new Google Sheet and change some parameters around. And like, we have this working. So it's not
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's not a super heavy lift, but it is like, it's way heavier than like, what is Zapier, or like, how do I, add a line to a spreadsheet kind of thing.
Yeah. So we're like 10 items through this list right now. And I would say to anybody who's still listening and who's hanging out with us, like, if this stuff is like super daunting, or you just don't know how to execute it, or you don't want to spend the time to learn how to execute it, go to Upwork and you can find people who can do this relatively quickly and relatively cheaply, and like repurpose these things over and over again. Or they can even teach you, like, you can like take a look at a Zap and say, oh, well, maybe this isn't so complicated after all. And you can learn that way too.
Yeah. And an even easier lift is to just join communities of accountants that are doing stuff like this and get ideas and like tag along and learn.
Absolutely.
That's probably the best thing.
Absolutely. Another plug for Realize right there.
Indirectly. Yeah. May or may not be sponsored. Okay, let's do this.
Number 11, you're up.
Let's do one where if you haven't met with a customer in a while, send an alert. So it could be an email, could be a thread in Carbon, it could be an event in Canopy or TaxDome or financial, like any of these things, right? You have a CRM of some element, and if you don't, you have your email account. You could have a list of customers and their email addresses, or a list of customers and their ID inside of the system that you're using, and have one field that is like last contacted. And if you have access to like the Carbon API, try to go through that way. You could grab like that type of stuff for messages. If you've got your email, you could, search your email and filter it by the date and like only show things that haven't had activity in a certain date range. It could be a really good use case for not using Zapier or Make, because you have lots of emails, lots of clients, and it could be really tough. This might be a good use case for a script that you hire somebody on Upwork to build, or it could be a good use for N8N, which gives you sort of unlimited uses of operations, even though it's a heavier lift to work on. So that's probably what I would do on the heavier side. But on the lighter side, yeah, it would be have some sort of database that links the client to the activity, and then run an automation for that activity. Anything you want to add to that one?
I'll just walk through the way that we handle this real quick. So we've got an Airtable base that's got a list of customers. Essentially, there's a column in there for the last time we met with them, and we have all of that data sitting inside of HubSpot. Like, we know the last time that we met with basically everybody. So our CRM platform, we just pull that date out every, however often, I think it's every day, something like that. And then put that in Airtable. We have a calculated field, like it's been 75 days, it's been 90 days, it's been 10 days, whatever. And then we just flag it. And we flag as an internal note, like, hey, just reach out to this customer, see how they're doing.
It's awesome. That's perfect. Speaking about riffing and just like picking random things, why don't we pick up on that thing you just said, which was we have our customers in Airtable. So how do you keep your customers updated in Airtable?
It's a good question. So as we have kind of iterated through the firm and what we are now versus what we started out as, which was like kind of like, put it together with Band-Aids and glue and stuff like that. We have sold different services and different packages and things like that. And they came up as a necessity for the team. Like, what do we do for all of these people? Right. And we've got all of these different services. They're packaged differently across people or across clients over time. Like, how do we track this without actually going into the engagement letters and looking at them and pulling it up and looking at the table that sits inside there? So basically just built out an Airtable base that says, this is the client, this is the primary contact with the email address, this is the secondary contact if there is one, this is when they started, this is what tier they're on, here's a copy of their engagement letter, and like, here are the different services. We either do this or we don't. Like, this is everything that we offer. We do this or we don't. And then we've also got that field in there for the last time that we contacted them. So it's like this one consolidated Airtable base that kind of shows the view of the customer and what we do for them, and kind of how they're different over time. And we're not bringing on a volume where this is totally unmanageable, right? We're bringing on 1 or 2 a month. So it's not a super heavy lift. We're just updating this base like as we go. And as clients roll off or transition out or whatever, we update that. We've got a field for that as well. Solid. Are you guys doing something similar, different?
2 things. We built our own sort of CRM that has our services and all of our clients in it. That's like, that was really fun. But specifically to Airtable, we do sync all of our Xero contacts to Airtable in real time. Sorry, not in real time. It actually is a scheduled 1 hour. You know how you can schedule these things in Zapier and Make. So we did it by the hour. And the reason was because we didn't want all these webhooks being sent in and managing a bunch of them. We're just like, all right, we would use this information within the next hour. Like, it would never be needed more than that. So mostly. So what we ended up doing was we said, okay, watch contacts in Make inside of Xero, and then if it already exists, just make sure that all the data fields are still the same. Because what it's doing is it's watching for changes within the last hour. Because it ran within the last hour, which is like the created date or the modified date inside of Xero. So we're looking at that stuff, and then it was like a simple router where we were like, okay, the address, look at the address, go up. If it's not changed, then leave it alone. If it's changed, update it. Same thing for contact emails and phone numbers and all of the other things that were important for us to use. And now whenever we update something in Xero, it shows up in Airtable. So creating new invoices, if it's already been created in Xero, it'll show up, the contact will show up in Airtable, and it'll have a customer flag on it, so we can run filters by customers. And that way, when we're sending out forms or things internally in Airtable, our team can pick a list from active clients inside of Xero. And again, we've got our other app for that kind of stuff too, but like this was the way that we did it for years, and like a year and a half, which was just to sync it up to Xero that way. So what's kind of cool with Airtable is you can also sync that base to other bases. So anytime we create a new base that needs our contact list, we can just sync that table in whatever view we really want to use. And then it's like having a live version of Xero contacts without needing to keep it manually updated.
And so that gets us kind of to number 12. We can piggyback off of this one. So sync contact data with Airtable to use in other forms. Let's talk about the other forms and other automations maybe that we could potentially use with this, or maybe some other apps, which you kind of referenced.
You do it. I don't know what you
mean. Okay, so we've got our contact sync between our internal accounting system and Airtable. What would we use that data for? Could be sending out birthday cards. We do that. That's another one.
So like one of the first.
So you got it.
That's funny.
You have an updated address, right? Mm-hmm. Send out a birthday card. Send out some sort of a card. Send out some sort of a gift. New client, maybe. Send out some sort of like a welcome package to your firm.
So we did a podcast episode on this one on Automation Town. And it was like the second one we ever did. Season 1, episode 2. And it was for when you want them to feel appreciated. And this is exactly the same thing. You could auto create the card and add the gift through this API called Handwritten, and it would all be part of like a Zapier or a Make scenario to be able to do that.
Yep. You can do that with cold outreach as well. So maybe they're not existing contacts in the name of like a customer, but maybe they're leads or prospects or something like that. Mm-hmm. Same type deal. Use Handwritten, send it through Make or Zapier or something like that.
Wicked. All right. Let's go through these. Let's pick. Oh, remember we were talking about alerts and like and approvals? I forget what number it was, but what happens if you don't get the approval? You're like super proud of the fact that you automated this approval thing, but then it just dies because no one pressed the button or they didn't approve it yet. You could also create an automation that is a fallback. So this could like text them and say, hey, reminder, we need this approved by X date, which is coming up in 2 hours. Please go check your email or do this thing. I haven't built anything like that, but I could see that being needed for people that are in like high pressure approval things like payroll and bill pay.
Yeah, for sure. Or maybe even the fallback going to create a communication back to whoever sent that thing for approval, because maybe it needs some sort of an update or maybe there's something wrong with it or whatever. That could be a use case for that as well.
Yep. All right. Next one.
Okay. I think that was 12 or no, that was 13. This is 14, I think. Okay. Doesn't matter. Okay. This is also one of my favorites, but aggregate non-integrated data to feed a dashboard or an analytics tool. Here's what I mean by that. If you have ever shopped for some sort of an analytics tool or a dashboard tool or a reporting package tool, whatever you want to call it, and in your shopping, you've looked for the integrations to that tool. It's like, okay, well, this tool would work for 5 clients because they all use this tech stack, but it wouldn't work for these other 50 because they use like some sort of non-supported payroll service or some weird GL maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or some internal system like a time tracking tool or something, whatever, it doesn't matter, but it's not supported, right? So maybe your client base isn't in one singular tech stack, so you can't just fit one tool to that use case. What do you do?
This was kind of like the first or second one we talked about, right? Like the automated reminder to fill in the non-financial inputs so that you could use it for stuff like this.
Could be. Here's what I'm thinking. Like, how do you take time tracking data and then put it somewhere where you can access it via that tool? And where we ran into this was when we were using like Power BI. It's like, well, Power BI only supports so many different sources.
Mm-hmm.
Like it'll support BigQuery, but it, like if you've ever tried to access QuickBooks data with it, like, whew, holy cow, good luck, right? Or most of these analytics tools will take in Google Sheets data and integrate with that for the most part. So our solution largely has been, what can we do in order to get that data into Google Sheets so then it can feed that dashboarding tool or that analytics tool?
Yep. I was going to go Google Sheets, or depending if the data is like super big, like over a couple million records, then you could go like open source database stuff like Postgres and stuff like that you could purchase. That's about it. Yeah. Google Sheets is like it's like the Swiss Army knife of getting data places. And if you can get it in there and then that connects to something else, you're good. Like there's a couple reporting tools that like, you know, they start with Google Sheets because they expect there to be all kinds of different data points. Like
for sure,
like Reach Reporting does that too, and like, Fathom has had it for a while, and like all that kind of stuff is great. So yeah, the number of Google Sheets that are going around just playing into these analytic tools has got to be pretty high.
Yeah. So the database that we use has historically been BigQuery, which is a Google product. And we've used an ETL tool, which is Stitch. So Stitch data will go and fetch a whole.
What is ETL? I feel really dumb.
Extract, transform, load.
Oh, that's a big one.
So it'll go. Yeah. So like Stitch will go and it'll fetch like Harvest, which is a time tracking app. It'll go fetch all of that data for a client and put it in BigQuery. Or you can even set the destination as something like Google Sheets. So we can move that data without necessarily creating a Zap or creating a make scenario or something like that. And there's a whole bunch of ETL tools out there now. We've used Stitch. We have used DataDo, which has 2 Ds at the end, something like that. But there's a whole bunch of ways that you can extract data from various apps and get it into something that's more ubiquitous, like a Google Sheet or a database scenario or solution where, you know, a lot of those analytics dashboards or tools can go and fetch that data from there.
Good. So that was one of the other ones we had on our list, which was like combine QuickBooks and Xero data into one database to run a bunch of queries.
Yeah.
This is exactly.
So how would you do that?
Well, that's exactly.
Same way?
Isn't that the thing? Put it into a data lake and then run queries based off of that. Just like one source of data versus trying to keep like the QuickBooks versus the Xero data points like coming into your automations, like throwing that into a data lake or some sort of database would be probably how I would approach it. But again, I'm not a data engineer, so there's probably better ways. What do you think?
That's how I would approach it. I would probably use some sort of a tool like a Stitch to do that.
Yeah, off the shelf. Let them connect them, and then you're just given that. There was another one that started with an A. I forget what it was called. There's another one out there that's yeah, it's not this. I was thinking of another tool. They're kind of getting into like the so A2X, right? Very good at grabbing stuff from other places and then helping you make entries for e-commerce data. You know, there's other ones coming out like Amaka and all these other ones that are trying, to do the exact same thing. I haven't spent a lot of time like competitively looking at the differences between those, but I can imagine there's some elements there of grabbing data in, holding it, transforming it. We should just ask them what they do, and then that's the answer to this one.
I'll tell you what, here's another one that piggybacks off of that, but automated platform migration. So have you ever had a situation where you've got a client who's moving from one tool, it could be a GL, maybe not, but moving from one tool to another, and maybe there isn't like a off the shelf or built-in migration tool or migration service that they have, and you got conned into helping them with it. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I think you look at what's on the shelf. So you've got your like one SaaSes of the world, and you've got your SaaS ants and all these things that, you know, people have been using for years. If it works, it works. Like, use those off the shelf ones. For us, like, we don't have an automated, hey, transfer. So we do a lot of conversions from QuickBooks over to Xero. And sometimes there's some issues with sales tax and exports and things like that to make it right within Xero. So like we've been playing around with grabbing all of the AR items for a certain period and then moving them over. But like anything in life, like it's like the juice worth the squeeze. So where you've spent like the last few years looking at the QuickBooks API, I've lived in the Xero API, and I look at the QuickBooks one, I'm like, I'd rather answer my emails and go talk to people around sales than deal with this. So it's like, I think this is one of those situations where it would be cool if there was like a migration platform thing. And that's what a lot of these like MMC Convert and Cloud Convert and Swift Bookkeeping Convert and all these other tools are trying to do with conversions. But show me one that's worked really well, and I'd be surprised.
Yeah, it's hard for sure.
So that's why I kind of feel like you pick the things that you know are really important and like are a heavy lift, and then you go do that. So I feel really good actually about building a like AR to AR import, knowing that we'll get contacts and we'll get taxes and line items done pretty well without like a ton of manipulation. We've done that kind of manually with macros in the past, but feel like we're spending too much on this one. How would you do it?
We've built several tools inside of Make that do most of it. Doesn't do all of it. It's not super clean, but do most of the heavy lift. And then we kind of figure out the rest, right? If we can get 80% of the way there, then I consider that a win. And then the rest is manual. So, all right, moving on. You pick the next one.
Let's go quick. Let's try to do these ones in like 30 seconds or less. Automated invoice creation and sending. This is a big one. We've got a big one. We've got a bunch.
Yeah.
So like in its simplest form, give somebody a form to fill out and an invoice sends out. Could be a spreadsheet too that has people adding stuff into it, and then there's an approver, and that approver is the only one that can edit those fields, and then like they approve it, and then it gets sent into the things. Sent into the things, super technical term for like creating line items and invoices and checking contacts and doing all that stuff. It's hard in the beginning, figuring out how to deal with arrays of data for line items. But once you crack that code, it's pretty fun. And again, hire somebody, ask somebody. You don't have to do it yourself. It's been done before.
100%. Same deal. How about SMS messages for when a deposit over a certain threshold hits the bank?
Yeah, you take that one.
The way that I would do that would be probably through Plaid, and then probably through some sort of a Make scenario where we're pulling transactions and looking to see if something hits a certain threshold, and then sending either like a Slack message or SMS, probably through Twilio. Maybe Dialpad, something like that.
Perfect. You could also, like, the lower lift would be to use something like FinTable, which integrates Plaid with Airtable for you, so you don't have to be a Plaid developer.
Yeah,
and then
FinTable.
And then that goes into Airtable, and you do all your automations based off of that. But yeah, I love that, so that you can look really great in terms of like, hey, you just got that $50,000 deposit into your bank, and like your message from that transaction gets to them before or just as like their banks when they log into the bank next. It's a pretty good feeling. hit a couple of these. So automated AR follow-ups beyond what the actual systems will do. What do you got for that one?
Similar, we use Make for that. And then, so we'll turn off the automated follow ups inside of QBO. We use Make to pull aged receivables. And then we will send customized messages via email, usually through the client's domain name, some sort of a like AR at whatever.com. And, we'll work with our customers in order to figure out like, how do you want that message to sound? What do you want that verbiage to be? What do you want that cadence to be? Because sometimes like there's 3 follow-ups or whatever it is, like that's just not enough. Like you want follow-ups, 5 days, 10 days, 30 days on a more consistent basis. And you want the verbiage to be customized. And then you also want it to come from a personalized email address. You don't necessarily want it to come from like a QBO or some other system or something like that. So that's the way that we would handle that. How would you handle that?
Really quickly, I think you almost have to ask yourself, why would I not use something like Chaser or Late Chaser, or all these other ones? Like a late follow-up app is pretty much one of the easier lifts to build on top of tools. So there's a ton on the market that you can choose from. And if it's cost, great, go play around with it. But one of the benefits that I liked is like, what if that app that you're looking at doesn't have approvals built in? Well, maybe you could say, hey, this client's late. Send it to the client Slack channel that's not with the client or Teams channel or like a dedicated channel. And you could say like, hey, do you want to send a reminder for this client? And like with what type of language, like what template would you like to use for this one? And if like you put buttons inside of the Slack message and then somebody clicks that, and then confirmation that it's been sent out comes back into Slack or Teams, that could be a use case for not picking one of the apps that built something like that in.
Right. So Chaser is new to me, and that is chaserhq.com.
Yeah, out of the UK.
Very cool. Yep. All right. What's the next one?
I like the alerts for balances above or below a threshold. So kind of similar to budget versus actuals. Some clients don't have budgets. Most clients don't have budgets sometimes. So maybe you're just thinking like, okay, if revenue dips, or if total expenses goes above, or if something, whatever, I don't have to go through every type of alert, but like to create a balance above or below a threshold can be done in Zapier or Make or any of these things. You're really just looking at the chart of account item and then the balance. So whether you keep that in a list in Airtable of the account and the balance, and then it goes through each one on a schedule, that's one way that you could do it. Otherwise, Zapier and Make have some cool things where you can store data inside of Zapier and Make and then reference that data without having to reference an external spreadsheet. So in Make, it's like data stores, and you could literally put in a little table of things that you wanted it to look at. But again, it's a heavy lift because no one else will have access to it unless it's like right in the Make scenario. Anything worth adding to that one?
The only thing I would add to that is that we do it similar to the way that we would do transactions over a certain threshold and just pull balances. We'd probably use Plaid for it because we would want it to be a little bit more real time than maybe like a QBO or a Xero is updated. Like I've got one client literally who wants to be texted every hour on the hour if their balance is below like $500 or something like that.
Oh, you're talking bank balance. Account. Gotcha. I was talking like any account, whether it be GL account or whatever. Yeah, sorry.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool.
Cool. That's not cool.
I think it's cool. Whatever.
Yeah, but the plaid thing is pretty interesting though. If it actually connects.
All right, we got through 20 of these things. What do you think?
Well, let's go through the rest of them and just decide if we want to talk about them or not. So one is email a digested list of GL accounts that haven't been used in the last number of days.
Similar to new GL accounts when they get created, a fairly similar process, a little bit more to it, but fairly similar process, and probably something that's worth at least looking into if you think that that's something that would be valuable to your customer base.
Right. So two things you could do. One is if the GL account has a last modified date, sorry, if the activity in the GL account has a last modified date, go for it. I doubt that it has that perfectly, so you might have to get around it by doing like a search of the transactions and then look at the accounts in the list and cross-reference them and then look at the dates. But yeah, it's doable. And I haven't built something like this, but it might not be something that you look at unless you're running a report with like 3 or 5 or 6 more columns on the month, and that's how you would normally see it. But here it could just be a digested email. The reason I brought that one up is because Zapier has a function called Digest by Zapier, and it allows you to aggregate a whole bunch of data throughout a period, and then you can release it on a schedule. And that's why that was worth bringing up.
Love that. How about automated accruals? That is a super big one. I don't know if we want to go so far down that rabbit hole. There's tools out there that'll do it. They're fairly expensive, like a FlowRev or something like that. You can do it by pulling data out of QBO or Xero through like a Geocon or something like that, and running some calculations or flagging things that are recurring expenses that haven't hit in the month or something like that. That is definitely that's a big topic, and that can get super complicated in an absolute heartbeat. But if you're looking to have a fairly automated end-to-end accounting process throughout the course of the month, and to help your firm scale, that's one way that you can do it.
Yeah,
or one thing to think about anyway.
So the easy lift for us was like creating a form for prepaids, and we would throw the items into the prepaid, and it would add it to the schedules. It would record the expense, and then it would record the remaining 11 months or whatever the form said to do it, without having to do any heavy lifts. The RevRec stuff, that gets a little bit more complicated, and you're hopefully using tools that are really good at that. Like, we all can't use Chargebee, but like if there's spreadsheets, maybe what you do is you have one sheet that is the entry, and then when that sheet is ready to go, you press a button on the sheet, and then that creates the entries inside of the system instead of exporting and importing. Okay.
Yep.
Next one. Or is it me picking one now?
It's you.
If there's a duplicate vendor report, you could do a duplicate customer report. So same deal, same thing as that. But again, it's one of these things where some of the tools now are providing reports for these too, so you don't have to like recreate the wheel. All right, we're grasping at straws. Let's do at least one or two more.
I'll give you one more for sure. Age pipeline data. So if you are doing forecasts for a customer, and one of the big things out there is future revenue, and having discussions around that, which can get kind of gnarly. Hopefully that customer has some sort of a CRM. So you can automate looking at the CRM and whether or not the pipeline probability for those prospects or leads has been updated in a period of time. If it's, and flagging whether or not it's real, then you can have that conversation with your customer. And then you can also start to assess whether or not your forecast needs to be updated. A great example is if you've got a customer who's like, yeah, we're definitely going to do 5 million in new revenue next year. And we've got all these leads that are sitting in our CRM. It's like, okay, that's cool. But you've had these 10 leads at 90% probability of happening for the last 6 months, and they haven't closed and they haven't moved forward. Is it really 90% probability, or is it more like 50, or is it more like 25, or really are these not even leads anymore? So you can have that conversation. It can help to inform your forecast.
Yeah, and if you don't want to have those awkward conversations, you'd be like, hey, as part of our relationship, we're setting up these alerts. Look, it just means that if things haven't moved in like 60 or 90 days, you're going to get a tag. You can go in and adjust them yourself. And if they have access to the Google Sheet 100%. Or the spreadsheet, they can go do the thing. Okay, yep, that's good. That's got to be at least 25. Can you think of anything else?
That's a lot. We went through a lot. You got any more?
No.
This is I think if you've listened this long though, and you've kind of listened to some of the automations that we've built for our customers and how we tie that back to advisory, you can start to get ideas for your own firm as far as what is possible and things that would apply to your customer base, because every firm's different. Every firm has different customer base, different industries, things like different tools, things like that. But hopefully this is more of an idea generation more than you can go and execute this by listening to this podcast.
And if you don't want to learn about accounting automations, my buddy Jason and I did podcasts about sending bags of ducks to people through Amazon's API, sending out vulgar bird pics to people, and all kinds of other weird stuff using automations on Automation Town. So it's the Automation Town podcast, yes. Which it's a hoot. So yeah, give it a look if you want to. We're trying to build a fictional world with characters, but automation topics as the main point of discussion. And season 3 is going to drop pretty soon, but the new trailer is coming out. So give that a check for season 3 to see if it's something you want to listen to.
That'll be awesome. And if you don't follow Effin' Birds on Twitter, you absolutely should. And you should definitely, after having done that, listen to that episode of Automation Town. If you haven't already, it is absolutely priceless. Well, Chad, I appreciate you being here today. It's been super fun. I'm thoroughly confident that those who are listening will have gotten a lot of ideas and a lot of knowledge from what you dropped over the last hour. And thanks for bailing us out of a bind.
Anytime.
Fair enough.
Thanks for this, and we'll see you next time.
Cool. Thanks, Chad. This has been the CPA Advisory Show. We'll see you on the next episode.
Hey, it's Jeremy. Thanks for watching the CPA Advisory Show here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and leave us a comment. We'll probably read your comment on the air. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at CPA Advisory Show. And if you have an idea for a topic or guest you'd like to see, email us at host@cpaadvisoryshow.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.